Okay, so this is right by number overview, and we're going to go through the student book and the teacher book, and I'm going to show you how to keep track of assignments. It's going to be really, really fast. Hopefully afterwards you can ask any questions you want, or you can come to my website or ask me personally, and I will answer any questions after that. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see a PDF version of my book. Can everybody see the table of contents there? Okay, so basically this is the student book, and you can see from the table of contents we have it broken down into stages, which are like chapters. These stages take kids from writing a one sentence, which I call a first power sentence, all the way up to essays. It also teaches them how to organize sentences in different ways as they go along the way. So the book, as you can see, it looks a little odd because it's been translated to a PDF. So that's the first chapter. But on the left-hand side of every page, there is what we're doing in terms of structure. So here we're starting with a first power sentence or one sentence, and we're going to work our way through all these structures here on the left side. And then on the right side are a bunch of numbers. There's 38 numbers, and those are called sentence patterns. And those have to do with the grammatical structure of sentences. And we're going to combine these two as the students go through. And so by the end, they'll end up with long, perfectly constructed essays that are grammatically interesting. That's the goal. Okay, so in stage one, we teach them to write one sentence and one sentence only. And one of the dangers that we have with most writing programs is they do too much too fast. So kids get frustrated really easily because they go from barely being able to write a sentence to being expected to write paragraphs and essays when they can't even construct a sentence well yet. So in stage one, we tell students to write one sentence, and within that sentence, they practice all of their grammar and punctuation and capitalization and spelling. You can use this program only for spelling if you want, or you can add other spelling things on top of that. I didn't with my kids. I just had them practice the spelling. Well, I did have them do some spelling lists and to learn like phonetic spellings, but in terms of learning to spell words, they learned all their spelling within the context of their writing. So if they misspelled a word in the sentence, they either didn't do it the next time, or if it was a child who needed some practice, like if they did it more than once, I would say, okay, write this word 5 times on the side before you put this back in the sentence, and then they would do that. That, of course, does not work with kids with learning disabilities, people who just can't spell no matter what they do, or kids, it just takes longer. Some kids, it just takes a long time. Other kids, once they see something spelled correctly, once they do it, no problem. But you're going to have kids across the gamut. So anyway, so they just, basically what they do here is they're practicing one sentence. And we use the word to. It's a numerical word, right? Because this is their topic sentence. I call it a first power sentence because it has all the power. And you teach kids that this sentence is the boss. This is going to tell you what to write next, and it's going to tell your reader what you're going to write about next. So they practice writing first power sentences. And if they make a mistake, you don't have to, they just put a line through it and copy it correctly below. Now, one of the things that is most important in these early stages is to force them to rewrite the whole sentence and not just erase and fix one thing. And you may say, well, why? That's so hard. It's not hard when it's one sentence. It also, about 80% of your students are just lazy. They are just going to whip out whatever, and they know that you're going to let them erase, so they're not going to try that hard. And so when they know they're going to have to rewrite the whole sentence, they stop and double check. They look, they're like, wait, before they bring it to you, they check to see if the capitalization is there. They check for this punctuation because they don't want to have to rewrite the sentence. So that's a huge part of it. excuse me, the other part of it is that when kids practice writing correctly, it actually creates good habits. One of the big problems is a lot of times in writing, teachers will grade the sentence or the paragraph or whatever, and they just give it a B because it's got bad grammar or punctuation, and the kid never has to correct it. So they just make the same mistakes over and over and over and over, and there's never any change because there's no need for them to ever change it. So when they are solidifying, like they get used to the muscle memory, the visual memory. And in the book, I give the example of were and where, which a lot of kids get wrong for many years, and many adults get wrong too. If they always write where when they mean were, and they never have to write it differently, they're going to continue to write it wrong. Write, W-R-I-T, write it incorrectly for years. As adults, they'll still write it wrong because nobody ever corrected it. So we start with this one sentence, and you stay there until they can do it. Now, they're going to be using words in their natural vocabulary. So as they gain words in the vocabulary, they are going to have to rewrite certain words. They're never going to spell everything correctly. So you basically, and in the teacher book, I do tell you, this is how you know when to move on to the next stage. So in the next stage, we make this into a paragraph by adding another sentence. And so if you look here at this paragraph example, now I have, I know 2 people. The second power sentence, and I teach them what that is the first person I know best is my mom. The second person I know best is my dad. So they're just learning that structure. I have 2 things, first, second, and they learn all the different ways to say it. And again, in the context of writing those 3 sentence paragraphs, they're learning their spelling, their vocabulary, their punctuation, those kinds of things. And in the student book, I have worksheets in the back for learning specific concepts. But my main goal isn't to teach that. For people who maybe don't feel comfortable editing, I suggest typing the sentences into a word processor, using Grammarly, something like that, if you're not comfortable doing it yourself. But honestly, when you start just editing one sentence at a time, you yourself as the teacher will learn the things to look for. And yes, you're going to miss things, but overall, you're going to be learning as you go. And that's honestly, as a teacher all these years, I learned most of my grammar and how to edit by editing thousands and thousands of essays. So that's just part of the learning process. Okay, so we have this 1, 2, 2 paragraph that they're writing, and again, you stay there till they can do it. And I have student samples in the book. Check how to check your assignment, worksheet suggested. Then in stage 3, we add a third power sentence, which basically means this. Now it's a 5-sentence paragraph. So now it becomes, I know 2 people. The first person I know best is my mom. And then this sentence, I have known her my whole life. That is a third power. Let me annotate this here. So this right here gives us more information, right, about this one. And the second person I know best is my dad, and then something about my dad. And so this one gives more information about the one before it. So what happens is you end up with this structure. You have a 1, a 2, and a 3. But we write it as a 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. Okay? All right, so they do that in stage 3. And they continue practicing. Now, with my kids in my home, the kids I homeschooled, we started this when they were young. And so a lot of them stayed at this stage and in the next couple stages for like a year, 2 years, because this is where they are. And it's great because you can use this structure in any of your other subjects. You can tell them after history, tell me 2 things you learned in history today. And because they have this structure, they very easily will be able to pump out a 5-sentence paragraph without even thinking about it, because they know exactly what to say in each sentence. And it makes it really easy to grade too. So you don't get like the really long, the kids that go, and then, and then, and then, and then, and then, and then, and then you've got a whole page, right? Or you've got like the kid who stares at the blank sheet of paper and goes, I don't know what to write. They know exactly what to write. I learned 2 things in history today. First, I learned about Christopher Columbus, blah, 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 blah. Second, I learned about Henry Hudson, blah, 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 blah. That's it. Boom, they're done. And so it makes it really easy. So anyway, when they're younger, you stay here. You stay here, you stay here, you camp here, camp here. And this is where most writing curriculum goes wrong, and most of us as teachers go wrong, is because we push too fast. Kids don't have good language skills yet. They don't have the grammar and everything else that they need. So you can see here, this is an expansion. Here's an example of somebody who went from a 1-2-2 to a 1-2-3. And here's my super dyslexic boy down here. You can see his is a mess, but he did it. Okay, so like for this young man, this is my oldest son who's severely dyslexic. This took him maybe 20 minutes to write that paragraph, because he had to look at a sample alphabet sheet to remember how to form each letter. So every letter is look, memorize, write, oops, erase, look, memorize, write. And so this is very difficult for him. So a lot of times, and in the teacher manual, I go through this, you have to, you don't make that child rewrite. And as soon as possible, you get that kind of a kid on a compensation, like using typing, word processing, or they're dictating to you, or whatever it is you want to do to compensate for that. Okay. Then we move on to stage 4, and stage 4 is the first time we introduce the idea of that there are different ways to say the same thing. One of the problems we have with most students is they think that everything they write on the paper is the end all, that it's the best thing that's ever happened, and they get married to whatever words they have on the page. They're just like, I can't change it. This is beautiful. It's my words. I produced it, right? It's not true. So the earlier you get them used to changing their sentences around, the more tools you give them to say things differently. So the first thing we do in stage 4 is we teach them to not begin with what's called expletive instruction, which is just a fancy word of starting out with there is, there was, there were, there are. And I don't do a whole lot of diagramming, so don't get scared if you don't like diagramming. But I did show you this diagram to show you how useless those first words are. We don't even diagram them when we diagram sentences, because they're just extra. So they have to learn how to change a sentence like there is one way to make a cake to perhaps the right way to make a cake is my way of making a cake, or whatever it is. So they have to learn to change that. And they do that, and again, it's within, and you can see what structure they're in on the left-hand side of the page, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. They're doing that within that structure. And we have samples. I have all the assignments laid out specifically. You don't have to guess. It's in the student book and it's in the teacher book. And the kids know how to check their assignments, and then I tell you exactly how to grade it in the student book, which I'll show you in a minute. We do something similar in stage 5. They learn how to change their sentences that have a to be linking verb in there. So this is kind of their first introduction to some basic grammar. Again, my goal is not to teach grammar. Grammar, they learn as they go. It's applied learning. It's not worksheet learning, which doesn't work, because honestly, you can give kids worksheets all day long, but they don't really understand what it looks like in their writing. So they learn about helping verbs and linking verbs, and I make them memorize it because it just makes their life easier in the long run. They learn how to change, like my best friend is my favorite person, to when my best friend brings me flowers, I know she loves me, or I am tired too, I want to go to sleep. So basically forcing them to say a similar thing in a different way. And we're teaching them how to do that. We're teaching them grammar. We're teaching them more interesting writing. And that keeps going all the way through. Again, assignments, suggested worksheets in the back if you want to use it. Now, in stage 6, we still have this 5-sentence paragraph, but I begin introducing what I call sentence patterns. And there are 38 of them. So you have a lesson for each sentence pattern with examples. I teach them what it is, how to use it. I give them examples. I show what it looks like in a paragraph, and it's all color coordinated. So they can see and they learn how to mark it. So they write a paragraph like, when it rained, 2 things happened. First, the trash cans floated down the street. Well, floated is a strong active verb, so they can mark that as a sentence pattern number 1. And so the assignments require them to put sentence patterns in their paragraphs. So they're learning the grammar, they're still practicing their paragraph structure, and they're learning how to make their writing interesting, but it's formulaic, which when you tell a kid, well, I don't know really what's wrong with your writing, it's just not very interesting. That's it frustrating. How do I improve it? What do I do to make it better? I don't know. This way you can say, hey, you need more sentence pattern number 1s, and they can go through and look and say, oh, I could switch this around and make this one a strong active, vivid active verb. That comes later. But yeah, and again, I have all the assignments laid out. And then they have a sentence pattern 2, which is ask a question. So it starts really simple. They're learning grammar, punctuation, how to incorporate each of these kinds of grammatical things in a paragraph. So it's applied right away. And then there's 3, which is exclamatory. 4 is open with an adverb. So of course they learn about adverbs there, but again, they're learning to apply it right away. Now you might have kids who don't understand the grammar. That's fine. It doesn't matter. They don't have to, I mean, honestly, other than English teachers and people who speak languages as a second language, you don't use very much grammar language in life. It's kind of like algebra 2. Nobody really uses it. But if you can, but a lot of times, even if the kids don't understand the concept of an adverb, they can look at the sentence pattern examples and go, oh, I know how to use those kinds of words. And they can write those sentence patterns and use it without fully understanding the grammar. A lot of times, most kids are not analytical until they get to junior high to high school. Most. Yes, there are some that are the exception, but just developmentally, just pure biologically, most kids cannot analyze anything, language, jokes, why somebody's doing motivation. They can't do that until they're in junior high or high school. Same thing with grammar. So you can still teach the concepts without them understanding, but it's better if they understand why they're doing it. All right, so we just continue this same rhythm. We just keep adding sentence patterns and they keep incorporating them in paragraphs. Again, I have assignments for each lesson. It's sentence pattern 5, open with a preposition. They do memorize prepositions because if you can find a prepositional phrase in a sentence, you can eliminate pretty much everything else. And then 6 is when a verb precedes the subject. Okay, so then on stage 7, so now we're just continuing this pattern. So we're now expanding the paragraph slowly while adding sentence patterns. And both things are going to happen slowly through the whole thing. Now remember, this is a K through 12 program, okay? Or a whenever you start to whenever you end. It's mastery based. You can't move on until you get the assignment right. You just keep redoing that assignment until you get it right. So don't, like what I'm showing you, you don't think like, oh, I've got to teach this year. That's not realistic. Unless you've got a 10th or 11th grader, even then it would be really hard to go this fast. This is a whole schooling program. Okay, so sorry, in stage 7, we go 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. So now we're, instead of 2 items, we're doing 3 things. So I have 3 reasons I need to go outside today. Can you tell we're quarantined? Okay. So I teach them about adding the extra examples, and then they're practicing those 7 sentence paragraphs while we're adding more sentence patterns to those paragraphs. So they're combining those 2 skills, and so every day it's 1 paragraph, one assignment per day. That's it, just 1 assignment per day. Unless, oh, and I forgot to tell you this. So on the assignments, I have a fast track and regular. So if you have a student who this is easy, cheesy, fresh and breezy, right? They just are zipping through this, you put them on the fast track. They're going as fast as they can through the program. If you have a younger child or somebody who needs more practice, you just keep them on each assignment. So like assignment 5 and 6, it's the exact same assignment, they just have to do it twice. And you can flip back and forth. So if a child's moving really fast through something and all of a sudden they hit something they don't get, then you start having them do all the assignments. And then they get it again, no problem. Boom, now they're off and running again. The whole point is, don't frustrate your kids. Don't go too fast, don't go too slow. Make sure you do mastery. It's not supposed to, writing is not supposed to be as painful as most people make it. All right, let me back up a little bit because I got ahead of myself. Okay, so we're at 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. We're adding sentence pattern 7, 8, and 9, 10, 11, and 12. And the grammar is getting more complicated as we go because they're getting older, and you'll notice these paragraphs are getting bigger. Do you see the size of this paragraph? We've gone from 3 sentences to 5 sentences. Now we're up to a 7-sentence paragraph. And that might look from this point of view like a lot, but it's actually not. Because they've been doing this all along, this is nothing to them. If I take any of my students, even the ones that are now 30, and I say, give me a 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, they can sit down and write that without thinking because they know exactly what to write. They did it for so long. And you have basically a 7-sentence paragraph with very few errors. And if they have sentence patterns that they still remember, that's the key, then they can throw those in there as well. But a lot of times those sentence patterns become so ingrained in their thinking and the way they start. It's interesting, my kids actually speak in sentence patterns sometimes because it's just so ingrained in the way they think. It's so ingrained, and that becomes a tool in their toolbox as they start writing. Okay. In stage 8, now we start playing with the paragraph, and we're getting them ready to make the shift to essays. And one of the problems with most writing programs is you go from, here's a little paragraph, which they call a paragraph. It's really just a group of sentences they've told the children is a paragraph because they say, well, you have to have 3 sentences in a paragraph. And so the kid thinks of 3 random thoughts, puts them together, and they call that a paragraph. So what we're doing here is so there's no way to jump from 3 random thoughts to a full essay. That doesn't make sense. So here what we've done is we've taught them the essay structure. If you look at that paragraph, I've taught them how to write a 5-paragraph essay by this point. They just don't know it. So now what I'm doing is we switch that. We vary that paragraph and we add more sentence patterns. And I teach 5 different paragraph variations, and they start learning to move that first power sentence around, because we all know that in real life we don't start with, I have 3 things I'm going to tell you today, right? We start with an introduction. Maybe we don't say we're going to tell you 3 things till we're in the middle of it. We move things around. So A, the first power sentence comes at the end. B, it comes at the beginning and end. C, we stick it in the middle somewhere. D, we don't even say it, we just imply it. And E, I teach something called 0 power sentences, which are all those introductory comments that don't really add to the structure. And so as I'm teaching, and you can see on the left-hand side there, you can see the variation A now shows up, and they practice the variation A. And so they're taking paragraphs they've already written and moving things around. So they're seeing how that applies. Variation B, C, D, and E. And you can see how big these paragraphs are getting. And then as they're practicing those variations in the stage, now we're adding more sentence patterns. So they get all that structure practice as they add it. So this assignment, notice they have to write 3 paragraphs using at least 1 sentence pattern, 13 in each paragraph, and sentence patterns 3 through 12 at least once among the 3 paragraphs. Use variation A in one of the paragraphs. So we're combining the two skills together. And maybe you looking at that assignment right now, that looks overwhelming to you, but trust me, when you've gone through the program, it's not. At no point are the assignments undoable or overwhelming, because the students who go through this program, they're so used to doing this that the assignment like that might take your fast students 10 minutes, and it'll take your slower students maybe a half an hour. So, all right. Again, we're adding more sentence patterns until we get to the end of this stage. And then we're on, now we do the magic. All of a sudden it's an essay, and my students always love it when I do this, because it's like, I just wrote an essay. Well, they've been doing it the whole time, they just don't see it. All we're doing is we take that long paragraph and we split it into smaller paragraphs. And they can see how we end up with an essay. Now, again, we're just expanding. So now we're splitting it up into little paragraphs, and some of the paragraphs will only have one sentence or two sentences, and that's okay. We're not going to stay there. But if they do have an assignment, like write a short essay on the Civil War, they can say, you know, they can write this kind of an essay. And honestly, even at the collegiate level in a lot of community colleges, this is considered phenomenal if you can do this, sadly. I've seen some of the community college, you know, every once in a while, one of my former students or a friend would say, oh, can you look at this essay I wrote for my class for community college? And I look at it and go, really? And then they get an A on it. And I'm like, wow, okay, never mind. I have higher standards, I guess. Okay, so we've split it up. That's all we do at this stage. We're now, and you can see the structure over here. Here's our structure, 1, 2, 2, 2. And we're adding more sentence patterns again. And I'm going to flip through this so you can see this in the book. And we get to the end of stage 9. So you can see here, these are some examples of what these paragraphs look like. And I put the colors in there so you can see how they're used. Okay, and now we start expanding that essay. Remember, the goal is we're expanding structure while adding interest. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a third sentence to each third power paragraph, and I show them how to do that, or second power paragraph. So now these paragraphs here, so if you see here, this is first, you will need bananas. Remember, that's just a second power sentence. Now they have this sentence that tells more about this, and this sentence tells more about this, or it tells more about the sentence before it. And I explained to them the difference between a 2-3-4 and a 2-3-3, which is probably a little hard to grasp right now because we're going through it so fast. But if you were to read the program, it would make sense because you would be doing it. And then I talk about first power paragraphs. Okay, so this is the bane of every English teacher's existence, because there's nothing worse than an introductory paragraph that starts like, I'm going to tell you, because most of the time, most writing programs say what you're going to say and then tell them what you told them, right? No. When I graded AP essays, if somebody did that, it wasn't a 5, I guarantee you, because it's not interesting. So why teach them to do that if it's not what you're supposed to do to begin with? Just teach them right the first time. So what you have to do is I actually quantify that by saying, okay, I'm going to call these paragraph themes. And when you write an introduction or a conclusion paragraph, then you have to use a theme. And you can use other ones besides these, but for this program, I chose using a quotation. You open with a quotation, you close with a quotation. It's an attention grabber. These are your attention grabbers or your attention enders, so to speak. You wrap it up. And you can see all the letters here on the left-hand side. Interrogate is asking a question or a series of questions, presenting a scenario, giving a conflict, using hook and reel, which is very, very popular right now. This is the #1 way people are using introductions and concluding paragraphs. You can see it in blog posts, newspaper articles. It's really interesting how things become more popular and go certain ways. Action, a call to action, using metaphor or simile, making a prediction, like if you don't do this, this will happen, or if you do this, this will happen. And then, of course, assignments for everything. And so they're practicing those first power paragraphs at the beginning and the end in an expanded essay while learning more sentence patterns. And so now we're to the stage where we have this nice essay. And again, there's no hesitation when they come to do this. This is not difficult. Any of my students will tell you, if I told them to sit down and write it, they wouldn't even blink because they can do every single piece of it. There's no problem with that. Okay. And again, we're going through, we're adding more and more sentence patterns. Grammar is becoming more and more complicated. But I teach them everything they need to know. Again, if they don't understand the grammar, it's not the end of the world. They can still write the sentences because they can look at the samples and go, oh, I know how to make a sentence that look like that and sound like that. Even if they don't understand that it's a predicate nominative or whatever it is. All right, so now we're finally at stage 11. And this is where we break up the essay even more. We separate our second and third power ideas into their own paragraphs. So you can see here now we have a 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1 essay. And I teach them that the third power paragraph has to either illustrate, oppose, or give further information. Have you ever had kids who say, well, I don't know what else to add? This is what you add. Give me more information about what you just told me. Give me an opposing point of view, or illustrate. Give me an example of that. And this is what they've been doing in their sentences anyway, so this is actually not a very hard thing for most students. And again, this is the length of an essay, and by this point, they're doing these assignments about once a week, just so you know. Unless you have somebody you really want to push through the program, then you can do these, then they're writing an essay a day. But generally, when I was teaching both homeschool and in classroom, I would, by this point, as soon as they get up into the larger essays, it's one assignment per week, which is why this is not a year-long program. But if you really wanted to push it, like if you had a kid that had to get all the way through this and you really wanted to push it, they could write an essay a day. You just have to make sure that you give them enough time to do it. So you're really good writers, this takes maybe 30 minutes. The ones that really struggle, they're going to work on it for a couple days. Not full time though, just like maybe 30 minutes one day, 30 minutes the next day, something like that. So I have all the assignments in there for that. Again, we're adding in more and more sentence patterns. We get to the end of sentence patterns. We have these nice long essays with all this interesting structure. It's perfectly organized. It's interesting. It starts interestingly. It ends interestingly. We have good illustrations. We have good examples. And then in this final stage, I teach essay outlines. And I only give them one each. I basically show them how to construct any essay. So if they have a question, like let's say they have an essay assignment that wants them to argue, persuade, right? Which is most essay assignments, SAT, CHESP, any standardized test is going to be persuasive usually. I show them how to use this outline to build their essay and then put it all together. And I give them samples of how to do that. And we do that with compare contrast. Again, on the left side, you can see where that is. And then at the back of the book, there's worksheets if you want to use any of those. Again, they're not comprehensive. The goal of this program is for me not to teach your child grammar and punctuation. You're supposed to be learning it in the context, but that is there for reference for yourself. things that a lot of times people need extra practice on or maybe don't quite understand. And then there's some quick references at the back, which my students that see it now are angry. They're like, why didn't we have that? Because when they're building the essays and they're using a lot of sentence patterns, they like to flip really fast back and forth and remember what they're doing and see examples right in front of them. So there's some quick references. The teacher book starts with an overview, and just so you know, a lot of the graphics are missing for the teacher book. So it's prettier than this, but every stage starts with an overview, gives you all sorts of goals and objectives, gives you Common Core standards if you need them. A lot of lesson plans require them. I tell you how to teach at the early stages. I even give you script if you need it. I tell you how to evaluate every single assignment and when to move on. And again, you get an overview of everything you're doing in the stage, the goals, the examples, how to teach it, how to apply the assignments. Here I show you my dyslexic boy and how I gave him a B because that was so hard. That's such a hard lesson. I wasn't going to make him rewrite it again. He was already done for the day. So I gave him a B, and then he just did the same assignment the next day. It was fine. So I put that in there, and I tell you when to move on from each stage. Now you may be saying, how do I keep track of this? Well, at the early stages, it's not hard because, well, first of all, you have to get an A on the assignment. So grading's super easy. But you do eventually, and I'm going to get a close up of that. This is how I keep track of assignments. I have a chart and I just have the date, whether or not they had to rewrite. I have the name of each child at the top of the chart, and then I have the grades. And in my webinar this afternoon, I'll be going through in detail how to do that. So, but yeah, that is pretty much it. So I'm going to unmute everybody, and if you muted yourself, you'll have to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask any questions. I'm going to mute Jenny because she's a wall. And I hear her kids. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
How do I know? Because I have different ages, so I think this is great, and I would love to do it and start it with my younger kids. But now I also have junior high school kids who haven't done this. How do I know where to start?
You always start at the beginning. You start at stage one and go through. So when I taught junior high and high school, a lot of times I would cover the first 3 stages like in one class period.
Oh, okay.
You know, like it's just like, okay, write a sentence, blah, blah, blah. But, and you know your kids, you might have a kid who really does need to start at stage 1 and stay there. You know, I had junior high kids who couldn't remember to capitalize the beginning of a sentence until I made them have to rewrite it a couple times, and all of a sudden it became important to them. And they decided, oh yeah, I guess I will capitalize the beginning of my sentences. Yeah, so you start at stage 1 no matter what. There's no guesswork. And you go through, and if they're flying through it, you just keep going as fast. So if I would say, like I know you have a 10th grader, you told me before, I would go until you see the struggle start. So when you see him kind of hit a wall, like, oh, I can't, this concept, either the structure is hard for me, or there's too much spelling and grammar and whatever. I'm getting too many spelling errors, and then you slow down. And then, you know, if he's dyslexic, you do some compensation, but for most students, then you know that's where their max is. Because what happens is if you move them too fast, can you imagine how frustrating it would be to try to write that huge essay when you can't even write a paragraph well? Yeah. So yeah, at the beginning, always start at the beginning. Okay, anything else?
I have another question, but
sure.
Do you do this with multiple kids like at the same time, or do you work with my kids? I should work with each one individually through this?
So when I work with more than one,
as far as teaching.
Yeah. So when I work with more than one, I start everybody together And then
Oh,
as they
no.
start splitting off, then it goes individually. And because everything's tracked individually, and I'll go into more of this in my afternoon webinar, I'll show you how to do that in a classroom setting or with a group of kids or all your kids in your home. So everybody's working at their level, at their pace, and it's really easy to track. And I'll show you how to do that this afternoon if you want to come back.
That's great.
Okay, anything else? Catherine, do you have any questions?
I think you answered all my questions.
Oh, praise the Lord, good. All right.
I have a question.
Sure.
I've never felt confident about writing. And so, and I just have one child. If I were to give him assignments, I feel like I could, I don't know, somehow objectively evaluate. But if I wanted to do the assignments as well to learn my own writing,
Yeah.
Do you think your points can help me to be objective enough about my own writing?
Yeah, you could just, if you're looking for your errors, you could just type it into, Microsoft Word or whatever and have it autocorrect. Or Grammarly will help you find some of those as well. Like if you just have a basic, the free Grammarly one will suggest different wordings and things like that. Sometimes it takes some judgment, but this is such an objective program that it really makes, and most writing programs are so subjective, that's why they're so frustrating. This is really objectively gradable. So it's either right, it's either a first power sentence or it isn't.
Okay.
It's either a second power sentence or it isn't. And then it's either spelled right or it's wrong. The only part you'll get is maybe some of the nitpicky stuff about punctuation and possessives, things that are hard for people to see. But if you use some word processing programs or you just find somebody to look at it, then yeah, it becomes pretty easy. Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible at some point, perhaps, to have my son checking my work?
Yeah. In fact, it's great to start that way, where you each sit and write a first power sentence and then you trade. And I even suggest that you can do that in a classroom setting too. And so what it does is they actually see other ways to write the same things. They go, oh, I never thought about writing it that way. And then they're able to do that. So yeah, you go back and forth because he'll see things that you don't. And one of the things we want to teach our kids is that editing isn't bad. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. The best writers in the world need editing. I mean, do you know how many times I edited my book and how many people looked at it and found things? I was like, how did I miss this? That's horrible. It's just part of the writing process. So yeah, when we teach them that early, then it goes really well.
Okay. So then could I even, from a teaching perspective, intentionally make mistakes and then see if he finds them?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? I know we're way over time, so sorry.
Hey, Lorena, I have a question.
Sure.
When you were teaching this in junior high and high school and you had a year in the classroom, did you get through your whole program?
No. So, well, I taught so I kind of had every year was different, but I usually had 7th and 8th graders. And then some years I had 12th graders, just depended on the year. But what we had this whole program across our whole school. And in fact, I have a school that's going to be incorporating this in the fall. And all the English teachers do it. And then all the subject teachers also require the kids to write their essays in the same format. And so they get it from K through 12. I taught in a junior high and high school. So basically you just get as far as you can. I mean, that's all you can do if you're in a classroom setting. Because even if you teach them a basic 1, 2, 3, 2, 3 paragraph, if that's as far as you get, that's still honestly more than most adults can write, sadly, so no matter what you do, you're setting down a structure, and then you're getting some tools. So you just get as far as you can and you let it go because that's all you can do.
Yeah. Good.
All right, anything else?
Mm.
Okay, I'm going to
I
stop
think good for
recording.
now.